But then it was time for the main event of the evening for the AEW World Heavyweight title, Danielson's career versus Swerve Strickland's world title. What's it going to be? Who's going to do what? And I like this match better than anything else on the show. Basically for Danielson's performance and the way that he can, take these people on a ride with him. And it was a wonderful moment. And who is going to beat him for this thing? This has to be a short-term title reign, one would think, when he's talking publicly about having neck surgery by Christmas or whatever.
Although that would be an interesting thing. If every match he has, you think this has to be the match he loses it because he keeps saying these things and then he never loses. So he keeps having to come back and defend it.
I don't know. I don't know. But he got the final countdown again. So again, every time a bell rings, some music publisher gets a new Ferrari from Tony Khan.
No one more than them. They're notorious for charging a lot. So that's another. What did we hear last time? It's a wrestler's salary.
Couple $100,000.
Yeah.
But that means everybody in the building only had to pitch in $4 a piece, and they could pay for it. But the people are into him. They're into the song. They're into Yes. There was Nikki and the kids at ringside. What's a Birdie and Buddy?
I believe so, yes.
Birdie and Buddy and
Nikki and the kids, Bree and the kids.
Which one is it?
He's married.
Well, they're twins. All right, but you can't blame me. They're twins. How am I supposed to tell them apart?
Well, he says their name, Brie Bella. That's his wife.
Well, you think they ever pulled a Swizz itch on him just for fun?
No comment.
Anyway.
Who's fun?
And well, it just depends. I could be fun for the whole family. And then Jim Ross was on color. He wanted to call this, if this was Danielson's last match. Swerve made his entrance. He had a new outfit on him. Prince Nana put the cape on him. And then rappers came out and rapped. Were they anybody that we should know, and were they any good? Because I can't tell either.
Well, I don't like the song, but I can't tell you. I don't know too much about these specific rappers and what was going on here.
Well, it was sort of like when I watched Ray Gunn do the breakdancing. I don't really know what the good stuff is supposed to be like by heart, so I couldn't tell whether this was any good or not. But nevertheless, all the fans were doing Swerve's house. So he gets some heat later on in this match because of what Danielson was doing. But they're encouraging people to cheer for the heel at one moment by doing this and starting this, and then he's trying to get heat, so they'll boo him the next month. So I'm not sure what's happening there. But they started out okay, and then Danielson hit the big springboard cannonball to the floor, and they popped. And then Danielson, this match was more serious, more professional, stiffer, potentially not dangerous, but stiff in a good way than anything else on the show, I think. And I did note again Excalibur.
Oh.
I want to call him by his name instead of Sockface or Shit for Brains, or because I want everybody to know he was falling apart. He was killing this match. He was the worst announcer ever on major television.
Wow.
I mean, think, who else has led a nationally televised program? Maybe that Mike Adamle. We weren't even watching then, but my God, this guy, he's trying to talk like he's fucking Pat Summerall, and he fucking sounds like Pat McGroin. He's trying to search for, verbose and flowery ways to say these things, like a Jim Ross or a Gordon Soley or a whoever the case in there. And no, he's a fucking nerd and a mark. And did you see Swerve give Danielson the Death Valley driver on the apron of the ring with Nana shoving the ring bell under Danielson's head?
In front of his family. Yes, I did.
In front of his family. What a fucking bump. And they did it just perfectly, but there was absolutely zero room for fucking error. And that could have been a hospitalization angle. But the only problem was then the next time you saw Danielson, he's bleeding from the front of his head when the back of his head hit the bell. So he hit him so hard in the back of his head, the front of his head busted open. And he stomped the shit out of Danielson on the floor in front of Nikki and the kids, or Bree and the kids. I wonder if they've done a DNA test to find out which one of the sisters is the real mother. Think about that now.
Well, I think it was the one that was pregnant at that time.
Well, that could be to lull you into a false sense of security, see? Confuse the issue. It's all part of the big work.
Who do you think they're working, him?
Well, it just depends on it. Just follow the money.
What money?
Well, that's the root of all evil.
What are you talking?
You're asking me questions. I'm answering them. I don't know.
So obviously, just to take a step back, money is the central issue in the Nikki and Brie Bella wife swap situation that Bryan Danielson's unaware of.
Yes, in order to convince him that those are his kids so he'll pay for them. And they're diverting some of that money probably into a Swiss bank account. And it'll come out one day. And that's how they switch off every 6 months. They assume each other's roles because they're twins, see? That's the way it works.
Yes, so.
It's going to be a whole big thing one of these days.
Maybe on AEW TV, who knows?
On AEW television. So, I mean, Danielson did the big suplex off the top rope and the stomps and the cattle mutilation. But Swerve escaped and dropped Danielson on his head, and they did another referee spot where he calls the doctors in to look at Bride. But the problem was that it didn't even look that bad for... MJF just got dropped on his head. It looked a lot fucking more concerning than the bump that they took here. So I think they ought to be more judicious with their... Let's call the referee in. This could be... He's paralyzed. It didn't shock anybody. Nobody went... But anyway, Swerve then, he's double stomping him and he's head kicking him. And he's getting 2 counts. And then, as Swerve starts kicking him over and over, Danielson starts hulking up. And this is where the people really started blowing. And at that point, this is wrestling. Danielson selling this shit, the look on his face, the intensity on his body, and then the comeback and the yes kicks. They had the people there, and again, I said if it was anybody else doing this shit, but Danielson, it wouldn't work. But then Danielson hit the big knee and swerved, got knocked back into the turnbuckle, and then no-sold it, walked out and brushed it off and kicked him in the head. And I went, what the fuck? That looked out of place. But then Swerve starts kicking the shit out of Danielson, and the people start going, no, no, no. And then suddenly Hangnail Page comes over the rail and shoves Nana down, and security grabbed him and took him out. So he was playing the George the Animal Steel at Shea Stadium part in this extravaganza, wasn't he?
I thought he was good actually doing that. You know, he's starting to come into his own a little bit as the crazed maniac, desperate hangman. And
he's been coming into his own ever since he was a young teenager.
Oh, will you stop it?
You could do that.
I don't know how that's even physically possible, ladies and gentlemen, unless you're Lanny Poffo, of course, the genius of glory and renown. But yeah,
but no, I'm not saying it wasn't a good intervention at ringside. I'm just saying that's like George Steele had to come out and try to interfere with Bruno and Pedro, and the cops had to drag him back.
The difference, too, is that people who went to that Shea Stadium show said that was the highlight of that entire match.
Yeah, that's true. And so then Danielson hits the big knee again. This time he gets a 2 count. And then they go back and forth, and Danielson hits another knee, and they come unglued again. And then another knee, and the label lock, and Swerve taps out, and the place goes nuts. And then they do the celebration with Nikki and the kids. I think Bree was there too by that point. And
that's right.
You know, as a matter of fact, you've heard the problem. You know, Danielson, he's very health conscious. He has the great diet, but he was going to try to stick to being vegan, but he couldn't give up eating brie.
All right. You know, that's a step too far. Let me ask you a question. Despite the cinematic beauty of the big ending here, any uncomfortableness, anything you don't like about a guy bleeding right in front of his kid?
Well,
right. I mean, there were points in the match he was right in front of them, and he was bleeding all over the place.
He's obviously they've smartened him up because they're both in the business, but the kids apparently are pretty decent workers, because sometimes you get the family having inappropriate reactions, but at the same point, you know that as nice as Bryan Danielson is, I've never met his wife, but he's not going to make the kids think this is real and daddy's really being hurt. So they've had some kind of educational process going on at some point there. But at their age, nuance is probably hard to explain. So I think they've had to have told him, hey, this is all play acting. It's for TV and daddy's not really hurt, but I'm going to look like I'm in a horror movie type of thing. I would bet you. But you got to help us. Say you got to be scared of the bad man too, type of thing. But I wasn't. This wasn't like, you know, when Cactus got fucking handcuffed and they're caving his skull in with a chair over and over in front of his children, who there's absolutely no way that this can't be dangerous to this person. This was a match, and it was a good match, and I can see where they could have coached the kids, but the kids wouldn't really be worried, to answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the only thing that made me feel a little uneasy. Just the idea, here are these little kids, including the daughter, who, from what we hear, is the one saying, please retire, I want you at home, daddy. And there he is bleeding a gusher right in front of them.
Well, but she's saying, please retire, because I don't want you to leave home, rather than, you know, but yeah, you're going to die.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe before the match was like, please meet Uncle Swerve. You know, hi, kids.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there was an element of that also. But I think the son, I think if they really wanted to make a great spot for the kid, he should have come over the fucking rail with a miniature pocket knife and tried to stab Swerve.
Oh, stab him? Now, this is a step too far. And this is in a foreign country that would have all gotten in a lot of trouble.
Well, no, they still speak English.
Right, but you
can explain a stabbing a lot easier when you're speaking the same language.
Well, I don't know about that, but they got the big moment, and Tony Khan at the media scrum afterwards, he had Bryan Danielson there, and Danielson said Tony had to drag him kicking and screaming into accepting the world championship, into being in this role, which is interesting, because you would think if you come to AEW to help him, you kind of want to be there. Danielson's a different kind of guy. You know, he wants to do his thing, but he's maybe not the assertive type, or the type who really wants to put himself in front of everyone else. But Tony clearly wanted that and wanted this big moment, and he got it. I guess, what did you think of the moment there at the end? Was this the right way to end the show? And seeing this now, have they made a mistake at all in the last 3 years not putting the belt on him or elevating him further, notwithstanding the injuries?
Well, if he didn't want it, I mean, he would have been a lot better champion than many that they've had. If he didn't want it, that's another thing. And he has been out hurt somewhat. The moment was great. I would have thought that they would try to make this Wembley about the moment with confetti falling from the ceiling and a guy holding a title over his head. It'd be Ospreay, because you've got years of him left, I'm sure. Tony probably signed him to a 20-year contract. And he's young, or younger at least, and he's new and fresh, and the people like him. With Bryan, this was a great moment, but how is it going to be a moment that jumpstarts business in America, brings the ratings up, a new personality on top? house show gates, whatever, on a long-term basis, where in 18 months we're putting a package together. Oh, let's go back and pick that spot out where he's raising the belt. Oh, he's already retired. He doesn't wrestle here anymore. I'm trying to figure out where they're going with this, how to coronate a new top guy that will have momentum by beating Bryan Danielson for this title. Because they can't, if they've done this without having who that is and how it's going to be done in mind, then in a couple months they're going to be going, oh yeah, fuck, he's kind of fucked up and probably needs surgery, and who are we going to put it on now?
And obviously we saw what Tony did with Sting. It would be a mistake for Danielson just to vacate and retire or semi-retire, correct?
Oh, good Lord. Can you... So you beat Swerve. He's going to be around for quite a while, but you beat him, and you've got the world title on a guy that's just going to kind of fade out here fairly soon, one would think. And then you're going to have a tournament again for another title again. No, if you've done this with Bryan, fine. What major star is it MJF now that he is no longer the international champion? It can't be Swerve again.
Well, that's actually one of the people, Douglas Jones on the Cult of Cornette Facebook group. That was kind of his question.
That sounds like a fake name.
If I'm Daniel Bryan, I'm insisting on losing to Swerve on my way out the door, not just for tradition, but his legacy and what it would do for Swerve heading into a program with Will Ospreay. What do you think about that? I mean, should Swerve... If there wasn't for this whole Danielson story, would Swerve still be the champion? You think he'll be a transition just to get right back to Swerve?
No, if Swerve is going to go into a program with Ospreay, Ospreay's got a fucking belt. Swerve would be challenging for that. You can't just do this big thing. Danielson won at Wembley Stadium, 50,000 people. Oh, and Swerve won it back.
Yeah, and I think they're going Ospreay Fletcher next. But I could be wrong.
Oh, good Lord.
I could be wrong.
I hope you are. But I mean, who is a name that could benefit and draw with the world title and carry the thing? And I'm trying to think of their available people. MJF just lost a belt. Will that be the consolation prize that in a couple months he ends up the world champion? Otherwise, who should be the world champion in this company besides Bryan Danielson?
Just spitballing here, so I'm not saying I endorse this or anything. But looking at the history of AEW and the champions that have done better than others in terms of ratings or drawing houses, Moxley, it would be a way to end everything with him and Danielson in the BCC and also give Moxley a hard heel turn.
Oh,
Christ. I'm not saying I endorse it, but you're asking who's at that level where they should be or could be the world champion there. There are limited options.
Okay, there's two people.
You don't want to elevate someone like Ricochet and put him in that position right now, I wouldn't think.
Well, gee, he couldn't even win the fucking match he debuted in. And and no, he's not the world champion. He's the another entertaining gymnast. Oh, yeah, hangnail. They tried that. That sucked. So I don't know who the world champion is going to be. Maybe they don't either.